Hello mates, and welcome to another Free PC Games weekly roundup.
How did this place get so big?
We got 5 games this week, 2 from Epic and 3 from what I guess we have to call Luna now, because Prime Gaming is no more. Before we start, do give this a like if you end up enjoying the video, and consider subscribing to stay up to date to every weekly video. All of our games this week are horror themed, so sorry that this is coming out after Halloween. Hopefully you're still in the mood for some scary, creepy games. Our first game from Epic this week is Bendy and the Ink Machine, a first-person horror adventure game available until the 6th of November. You play Henry, who comes back to the animation studio where he used to work, to find it's changed quite a bit, and it's not changed for the better. The look of the game is the aspect that sticks out the most, I reckon. It's all in the style of 1920s animation, in monochrome sepia, white and black. The doors, floors and some of the items in the game world look like they were just sketched, though the majority of the animations are far smoother than you'd see in those early cartoons. Lighting plays a large role in the game as well, beyond simply illuminating areas. Items that you can interact with will glow when you're near them, and of course, lack of light adds to the horror tension. The items that you can find are used in combat or are used to solve puzzles, like fixing machinery around the corrupted studio. The game actually does have a fair bit of combat, which is all melee, and you can get killed if you get hit 4 or 5 times in a row. You recover from wounds if you get a bit of breathing space, but even if you do die, you'll just need to walk towards the light to return to life, which is completely the opposite of what you're told to do in real life, by the way. The game creates checkpoints, so it generally keeps your progress. Standard foes will not regenerate any damage you've done to them, for example. But if it's a boss fight or a major chase sequence, you might well restart from the beginning. You can manually save at a time card station, which is a good idea because it lets you return to that particular game state rather than having to restart a chapter if you close the game and restart it later on. Those non-combat items you pick up don't exactly go into an inventory. Once you've got them, they're used automatically when you click on the area that needs them. And you rarely collect more than a couple of these items at a time anyway. The overarching story is told through cassette tapes that you can play or read as long as you're close to them, and they're generally from the employees of the animation company, detailing some of the changes that happened while you were gone, as well as sometimes providing clues to solving the puzzles that stand in your way. Later on you'll meet characters that also expand upon what's happening, as they talk to you in cutscenes. The game takes between 3 and 5 hours to play through on average, and is the first of 3 games based on this main character Bendy. The game had a mixed reception with the critics, sitting at a 69% on OpenCritic, I'm not going to say it, and a 71% sweet on Metacritic. The reviews ranged from a 95% down to a 30%. So it's a real hit or miss game for people. For those that felt it hit for them, they loved the tense atmosphere and the unfolding story, and appreciated the contrast between the cartoon aesthetics and the horror vibe. No one really liked the combat, which often failed to register hits and felt pretty clunky. The large number of fetch quests was also mentioned across positive and negative reviews, with people finding that the puzzles were often too simple. Those that really didn't like the game felt it was just too simple in general, and not scary enough for adults, but at the same time had too many scenes that weren't really suitable for children, so it didn't really fit anyone. Things are quite different on Steam though. The game sits at a very positive, with 88% of people recommending it overall, and 94% of recent reviewers recommended it. As with the critics, which I didn't mention, there's a lot of comparisons to BioShock, but here on Steam they also compared it to Poppy's Playtime, which I think is a bit closer to the truth. There were mentions of bugs with saving that soft locked people out of the game, though they do appear to be fixed now. The release schedule for the game was also an issue for some people. Each of the 5 chapters that it contains were released one at a time originally, and some people that maybe bought 2 or 3 of them couldn't upgrade to the full 5 chapters. They had to buy the game again, which hurt their review scores. Some also found the ending of the game rushed and unsatisfying. In general, people found the game just about scary enough, with a good story and fantastic visuals and audio. I really enjoyed Bendy and the Ink Machine. I finished it in about 4.5 hours, so it didn't wear out its welcome, though it got close to doing that when I was given 3 or 4 fetch quests in a row that were just not interesting or fun to do. Other than that, there were some fun puzzles, a couple of decent boss battles that took me a few tries. There were some good stealth sections, sort of. You can't sneak at all. I also thought the story played out really well, and I was interested enough to want to finish the whole game. I don't always do that here. There were occasions where I was a little lost on what to do, but I figured it out without it getting too frustrating. I can't say that it did anything like really outstandingly well beyond the graphical style, which I thought they used really well, and the audio, which was great. But the general vibe of the game worked for me pretty well. If you enjoy atmosphere and story above minute-to-minute gameplay, and like this kind of mild horror adventure game, I think this is a good one to pick up. Our second game from Epic is Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit, a pixel art retro point-and-click adventure game available until the 6th of November. We are in the world of FNAF, well, Five Nights at Freddy's for those that don't know, playing as Oswald, a 10-year-old boy that encounters a murderous robot from the franchise as he jumps between the current time and the past via a ball pit. The game takes place over 5 locations that you can freely travel to, and of course you've got the ability to jump back to the past. Calling this a point-and-click adventure game sells it a little short in terms of game mechanics. It is one. You do pick up items to be used elsewhere. There's a helpful menu system that tells you what objects you can interact with a traditional hand icon. That also brings up an inventory menu, only if you actually own an item you can use there, which streamlines the process a bit. We also have some logic puzzles, another staple of the genre. But on top of that, we have hiding mechanics, which are extremely important in this world, where you're often actively being pursued by a 6-foot-tall plus homicidal robot. Whenever Spring Bonnie is around, the main antagonist, though there are others, you get a noise meter. If you go too high on this meter, she'll come running, at which point you will absolutely need to find a hiding place. Once you're in one, you have to complete a simple quick time action to not alert her to your presence. That's not all though. In line with the idea of Freddy's restaurant being a children's birthday location, there are a bunch of arcade machines that can be repaired and played. Very old school versions of Asteroids, Space Invaders and Frogger, to name but a few. You do need to play them for some game progression reasons. But once they're fixed, you can actually just play them as much as you like and try and get a high score. The look of the game is pixel style graphics, though these are detailed, more than the description would imply. The sound design is a very important part of the game, both in the noises that you make and in building the world out in general, and letting you know where some of these robots are. A single playthrough is expected to take around 4 hours, with 100% completion needing multiple playthroughs and taking an expected 16. The game has 2 difficulty settings, one story based and the other scarier content, and you can turn hints on if you find yourself getting stuck. Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit did well with the critics. It sits at an 83% on OpenCritic and an 87 on Metacritic. The graphics and sound design are highly praised, especially the scare scenes that shift to a first-person perspective if you're caught by one of the animatronics. The secret areas and the effect they have on the ending you get was well liked, as was the number of endings you can get, which I think's 4. It was considered very replayable. Those that loved the game, and there were a few 100% or really high 90%, were fans of the FNAF franchise and felt that Into the Pit captured the fear and horror really well. While the story was liked, there was a concern that elements were not fully explained, and that without prior knowledge of the lore or reading the book the story came from, the endings might not make sense. A few bugs were noted, and the slowness of the menus and movement were criticised by some. Over on Steam, it did even better. It's at an overwhelmingly positive overall at 95% and 91% for the most recent reviews. The positive reviews mirror the plus points from the critics, as you'd expect, and I didn't see that many downsides mentioned in those reviews. The negative reviews had a few objections to the game. The first was some game-breaking bugs that, from the developer replies, seem to have been fixed. The second is the short length of the game, with some saying they finished it in under 3 hours and didn't want to replay it. The third issue is that it wasn't scary and was just a series of fetch quests. It's a click and point adventure game, that is basically what they are. So I think some of those were written by people that just don't like the genre. Most people found it a return to scary form for the franchise. I played for a couple of hours and I think it's really effective at what it tries to do. A point and click adventure game with horror based mechanics that have you running from crazed animatronics. I'd agree with those that felt that parts of the story weren't explained very well, but that's part and parcel of fantasy stories and wasn't a big problem for me. I liked the range of mechanics in the game and felt that the puzzles were pretty reasonable and not that obscure. If you do like the genre, this is a well put together game that has a good chance of really entertaining you. Our first free game from Amazon Luna is You Will Die Here Tonight, a top-down zombie-infested adventure puzzle game available until the 3rd of December via the good old game store. That's maybe not quite the right description of the genre though. It's part Resident Evil with a top-down isometric view, part House of the Dead shooter game, and very small part roguelite. The story is a mystery to be solved. Your team of 6 agency operatives wake up, one by one, in a strange underground base filled with zombies. You control each character, portrayed by an old-fashioned looking 2D sprite rather than a 3D model, and you travel around this strange place, solving puzzles to attempt to escape. You have ranged and melee weapons to protect against the zombies that roam around the place, and you can initiate combat, which is where the House of the Dead style fighting comes up. If you attack, you might have a little bit more distance on the zombies, but if you are attacked, they are probably going to be very close up when the game shifts into a first person perspective. You can use your ranged or melee weapons to put them down for good, but if they do get up close and personal, you have to button mash to get them away from you. Otherwise, they'll take a chunk out of your health. The more often in a fight they get into your face, the harder it is to push them away though. If things start to go wrong, they tend to carry on getting worse. Outside of combat, you can interact with objects on a controller, using the buttons which represent the available options. For example, a locked door might let you try and open it on A, B will let you peer through the keyhole. There are plenty of levers to switch, door handles to collect, and traps to fall into as you explore the underground lab. All while you try to work out exactly what's going on, while trying your best to find enough ammo and health packs to stay alive. As each team member dies, and they're probably going to, look at the title of the game, you're able to switch to one of the others until all of your characters are gone. You can loot items like ammo or med packs from those that have fallen, but any important items, like those door handles, stay with you. If everyone dies, you restart at a checkpoint, provided you have some of the K coins that are dotted around the map, so you don't lose all of your progress until you run out, at which point some of it will be reset. Each character has their own abilities. For example, one character can improve weapons, which carry on between deaths, so there is a small element of meta progression here. That does mean there is a small amount of tactical thinking in who you should choose next, given their specialities and the puzzles that need to be solved. The game is relatively short, with an expected 4 to 5 hour completion time for the true ending. You Will Die Here Tonight didn't do great with the critics, sitting at a 65% on OpenCritic and a 61 on Metacritic. It's a bit polarising, another one that is, with some reviews in the 80s and one up to 90% and others down to 40%. The positive reviews said that this was a really good homage to the early Resident Evil games, RE1 in particular, and also horror tropes from movies, while they felt that it still updated the game enough to appeal to today's gamers' sensibilities. The inevitability of death for at least some of your characters, often as a complete surprise, really worked for some people, as did the humour injected into the game through the dialogue that characters have when they interact with the world. The puzzles didn't always hit for people. Some were described as a bit obtuse, and most people felt that the characters fell flat outside of maybe a bit of humour here and there. Having read the worst reviews though, I'm not quite sure why the scores were quite so bad. There was enough praise in the rest of those reviews that it felt like it should have been a fair bit higher. Over on Steam it's much more appreciated, sitting at a 91% recommendation. Again, there's a lot of love for this as a Resident Evil 1 clone / satire, with people enjoying the look of the game and the change to top-down isometric perspective. There were several mentions of the high difficulty at the start of the game, and then a lack of difficulty with combat specifically after a certain point, though pretty much everyone liked that shift to first-person combat. Not everyone enjoyed the looping nature of the game, feeling that it became repetitive. The story was liked by most people, though that comedy was a bit hit and miss. Generally, people just like this as an RE1 inspired horror game. Personally, I didn't enjoy it. I think I'm in that group that are finding the game difficult at the beginning, and using the controller for the House of the Dead combat sections isn't working for me. The instant and unavoidable deaths that you get when you're exploring are just frustrating to me rather than an enjoyable mechanic. It could totally be a skill issue, but an hour and a half in, I'm just not enjoying myself. I can see why other people enjoyed it though. It's just not the game for me. If you like Resident Evil 1, You Will Die Here Tonight has a pretty good chance of working on you, I reckon. So if you have Prime, there's no better time to pick it up. Our second game from Luna this week is Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest, an interactive novel RPG available until the 3rd of December via the Amazon Games launcher. This is another interactive novel set in the World of Darkness universe that is primarily known for Vampire the Masquerade. You play Maya, a young woman who returns to her ancestral home in Białowieża. I think that's how you pronounce it, hopefully, fingers crossed, which is in Poland. She goes there to learn about her family and find out why she's been dreaming about the forest nearby. You get a range of stats for Maya that are affected by your decisions, and which in turn affect the options you have as you move through the narrative that plays out in text on the left side of the screen. The primary stats are rage, willpower and health, and they are the main limiters in the options that are available. Rage pushes you to reckless or violent actions, and karma options might need you to spend some willpower to resist that rage, or might cost you some health. You aren't dead if your health runs out or any of the other two, but you do lose dialogue options due to your lack of willpower, health or rage. There are options that restore health, willpower or that increase your rage, so these are always in flux. You also have your personality assessed. In fact, you set the tone of the story in the prologue with your choices, with 5 traits reflecting the choices you've made. As with pretty much everything else in the game, the levels of these traits will open up or deny other dialogue options. You can see your character sheet at any time via the icon in the top right, which gives you full details of the Maya that you've played so far. Your choices also affect your relationships with the various characters that you meet during the game. Upset someone and they might become hostile, so good luck getting their help later on. All of the characters are portrayed to the right of the screen in stylised cutouts laid over real world pictures, and the sounds of each area can be heard over some background music that shifts between dramatic during fight scenes and calm but a little ominous in the forest. As with the Vampire the Masquerade interactive novels, any lore terminology can be hovered over for a more in-depth explanation, which is helpful if you don't want to have that extra dialogue. The first playthrough is expected to take 3 to 4 hours, so multiple runs is not that time consuming. This did fairly well with critics, getting a 75 on OpenCritic and a 78 on Metacritic for the PC game version. It was hailed as a well-written story, and the choices that were offered were seen as meaningful to the overall narrative. The short playtime was a bit of a downer for most reviewers, and quite a few felt that the last third of the game felt rushed. The really bad scores seemed to come from reviewers that don't enjoy interactive novels, and wanted more interactivity from the game, or just felt it would be better as a short novel. Some didn't feel engaged by the story, while others got really involved in it and agonised over their decisions. The setting of the world worked for some and was a letdown for others, but most felt that the presentation and the writing drew them in pretty well. Over on Steam, it's a very positive overall with an 84% recommendation. Reading through the reviews, that 84% feels a bit too generous though. Many of the reviews were far more middling, with caveats to the recommendation. It was seen as too short, with many people completing the run in under 2 hours. A lot of people felt that the characters in the game were shallowly written, though most people liked the writing overall. The RPG elements were a fun bonus for the majority of people, and fans of the Werewolf the Apocalypse setting enjoyed visiting the world, though there were a few that had issues with maybe misapplied lore, of course. I've played through a single run and it took me an hour and a half without skipping text or skipping choices, and it was okay. I do have issues with the pace of the writing. The first third or so was leading up to the, spoilers here, shocking revelation that Maya is a werewolf. I'm sorry if you didn't read the title and that came as a surprise. Sarcasm aside, I'm not sure what the point of stretching that out was. It wasn't going to be a surprise, ever. It leads to the last part feeling a bit rushed, though it also felt that there wasn't that much story left anyway. I did like the choices and the effect they had. They felt impactful, and I thought that the RPG elements worked well within the visual novel framework. It's not a lot, but it does affect your decision making, which is the real point of them. I enjoyed this as an introduction to a new part of the world of darkness that I didn't know, even if the story itself wasn't especially strong. If you like interactive visual novels, this is a good branching narrative with mostly good writing set in an interesting world of werewolves. While it's free, I'd definitely pick it up. Our last game this week is Halloween Stories Horror Movie Collector's Edition, which is available via the Amazon Game Store until the 31st of December. This is a return to the true hidden objects puzzle games, not like last week's True Fear game. Here we have full customization of the difficulty level, giving you the ability to turn off all indicators, hints and skip timers, and hints in general, or just a choice of 3 preset levels: casual, advanced and expert. This also has the location indicators that let you know where you can solve a puzzle on the map. You can switch that off too, and given that the game restricts the number of open locations to less than 10, you may not really need to have these hints on. We have mini-games, the typical logical puzzles that you get in these games, standard object use chains, and of course, hidden objects puzzles. You play Ellie, whose friends disappeared into a movie somehow a couple of years ago, so you have to venture into 3 separate chapters to rescue each one of them. The collector's edition version has a bonus chapter too, where you need to solve the mystery of a bunch of monsters that have appeared, in the same general setting of the main storyline. The story across both isn't the strongest, they generally aren't, but it does a good job to tie together the scenes that you'll visit in your travels. We have a return to uncanny valley graphics for the characters you meet. They look very odd and they have some very odd effects when they're animated. A true return to form. We also have a couple of collectibles and in-game achievements that you can collect. As per usual, there aren't any critic reviews on the usual sites. They really don't like these hidden object games. But we do have some on Steam, where it sits at a positive rating with 94% of people recommending it, with the only negative review stating that a bug is stopping them from progressing in the game, one that none of the other 30 odd reviewers or me experienced. The only real complaint apart from that is the length of the game being a bit too short. I can see a few sub 4 hour completion times. Otherwise, people felt that it was one of the better hidden objects games, and I'd agree. The object use chain was never too long, never had too many locations open at a time, which is a personal preference, and the logic in hidden object games were decent, with a wide range of puzzle types, a couple that I'd not seen before. I played on advanced level rather than expert, but I never needed to use the indicators on the map, never got stuck on any puzzles. So maybe the game's a little bit on the easy side, and experienced players might want to at least go for expert level at the beginning, or certainly play the hard versions of the puzzles. The main game took around 2.5 hours to complete on advanced, and the bonus level was quite chunky and took me another hour or so to finish. Still, it was less than 4 hours for the whole thing, a bit on the shorter side for these games. But it did everything these games try to do really well, so if you're a fan of the genre, definitely pick this one up. Well everyone, we all managed to survive the horrors of the free games given away in the Halloween season. Good job. That does mean we're done for this week, so as always, like if you like and subscribe if you want, but most importantly, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.